Yes.
Doing
Nice.
practicing podcast best practices since 2021.
Right. Yes. Welcome, everybody, to an episode of Spine Crackers. I am Matthew, one of your hosts.
I'm Gabe, another host of yours.
I am Paul, another host of the Spine Crackers podcast.
And I love how we're all sounding.
We're
if anyone has audio problems, and fuck you,
get out of here, dude. you're at this point, you're a nerd. And if you want it to be better somehow, we have a Patreon, and you can pay for it to be better.
And I'll retract my fuck you if you were to take that route.
Actually, I was listening to some past episodes last night while I was playing Overwatch till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right on.
And I realized how terrible I sounded through my iPad microphone. I felt like a chump, and I have like the best microphone out of all three of us now, and I feel like a king now. Chump to king.
It's true. Well,
it's a real Dickensian rags to riches story.
Yeah.
Or wait, who was the guy? Not
Ben Franklin.
No. Well,
Thomas Jefferson.
No. There's a dude. Hold on.
Who's that
Aladdin.
motherfucker?
Aladdin.
Yeah, Aladdin.
That is true.
It is true about Aladdin, but
fuck. Who's the Ben Franklin character though?
Ben what?
The rags to riches Ben Franklin guy. Oh, come on now, you guys.
I genuinely don't know what you're talking about.
This is high school
okay,
social studies.
The guy that I was thinking of, the dude that I was thinking of was Horatio Alger, who wrote all the rags to riches stories back in the day. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, Matt.
Fuck. You know what? Horatio Alger is good.
Who is the Ben Franklin rags?
Like someone that Ben Franklin made up?
Yeah.
The Poor Richard's Almanac.
Sure. Something like that. I don't know. Again, listen, I think a glaring gap in my educational sort of background is history, which I think is deathly important to reading.
Speaking of,
I genuinely believe that. And this is overall a caveat about this book we're about to discuss as well.
Wow. Great segue. It's
because
like you've been on another podcast.
That was an off the backboard alley-oop to yourself.
And also I'm covering my ass too, because it's like, part of the impetus for reading in general is to increase my historical context in various time periods that I don't understand very much. And I think this particular book and this region of the world at this time is one of them, but also fascinating and really just really interesting.
Okay, so what region of the world and what book are we talking about here?
We are talking about The King of Trees, a collection of 3 short stories by Ah Cheng, Chinese author. Just kind of describing the lives of various characters during the Cultural Revolution in China. All of the 3 stories, they're all the king of something. So we have the King of Trees, the King of Chess, and the King of Children. Those are the 3 stories.
Right.
Not to get too ahead of myself, but they are, I think, just Taoist stories about mostly the kind of educated youth, as they were called, living their lives, sent to rural locales to kind of just like garner gather resources and sort of, I don't know, like gain cultural enrichment through association with the poor. I think was Mao's like initial like mission statement with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of the setting for all of them, like these rural settings where these quote unquote educated youth go to be taken out of the, I would say probably they would call this like degenerate like urban settings, to go and kind of get some calluses and, you know, become adults in these rural scenarios. But
yeah, man.
Oh God.
Sorry.
Wrong country. What, right?
No, it's the right.
Oh,
it's
you're
the
right.
Right
it is the
country.
right country. Damn, I'm wrong. Holy crap. But yeah, so Matt, like before we get into Mao and all that, which I think we can all agree, just on your caveat that we know basically fuck all about this period of history and this place. But why did you pick this book? Like, how did you find it? What's your, like, what was it just general kind of like increasing the scope of your reading, or what?
Yeah, I mean, mostly it was just you know what, like there was some news about Xi Jinping, right? Like
China.
yes, exactly. You know, and even still, right? There it was it was like a rip from the headlines kind of decision making process. I wanted to read more Chinese writers, and I'm gonna butcher this, but I had been meaning to read one of the even earlier classics, which is referenced in this book, which is like The Dream of the Red Chamber or The Dream of the Red Mansion, something like that, and Water Margin as well. Like those are the books that I had been intending to read, but I wanted to read a Chinese writer. And in my kind of cursory searches for that, this came up as somebody who was really highly regarded. So that was kind of all it took. And then obviously New Directions, nothing.
If any New Directions representatives are listening, we buy more of your books per capita than Cliff Sargent does. So
that's fucking true. And I think overall we've had a very positive experience. So
very positive.
What other books have been New Direction?
Oh, dude, Base Cathedral's New Directions.
That's all I
believe Last Samurai was New Directions.
Last Samurai, the Mountain Lion, or no, that's New.
No, Mountain Lion. No, Mountain Lion is They Who Will Not Be Named on this episode.
Yeah, fuck those people. But also, good job.
That's my favorite book.
It's one of my favorite books I've ever read. But yeah, it was literally like an expansion of the reading.
Nice.
And
which is, like, for the record, pretty much all the reason anyone ever needs to read anything.
Precisely. Yeah. I think, Gabe, you were saying, and we've talked about this before, but every book is the sequel to the next.
Yes.
And I don't know if we had discussed that in any, you know, I think it's been referenced or whatever, but I think that's a really healthy way to like read, which is to create personal, like kind of rabbit warrens of association that are your own, that are perpetually expanding and building on each other. And
that is my personal literary theory. Just I'm basically Harold Bloom. Every book is a sequel to the last book.
That is kind of his shit. I mean,
is that what he thinks? I was just saying that because it was dumb. But
I don't think it's dumb, man. I actually don't think it's dumb. Harold Bloom has more of like there's a spinal column, to like Western lit.
I do think the reason I don't like consciously approach it that way, but I'm like, it makes me open to, I feel like it's a way to be open to resonances and open to like links that you might not otherwise see. Like, I feel like a lot of times people read shit and it's like they chop it off at both ends. You know what I mean? That it's this fucking
right
in a vacuum isolated fucking vacuum sealed text. And it's not, and it's like more fruitful if you think about the way it fucking interacts with others.
Well, here's a question: does a sequel have to come directly after its predecessor? Because if it doesn't, then that means every book we've read has been a sequel to every book we've read.
Yes, it's a web. It's not a line. It's not linear. It's a web.
It's rhizomatic.
It's rhizomatic. Exactly, dude. What the fuck is a body without organs? Tell me, or I'll fucking kill you.
Or I'll fucking kill you, dude.
It's string theory. It's quantum.
All right. Well,
mechanics.
maybe we can reserve our literary theory musings for a Patreon only episode.
But yeah, so I mean that was the decision making process. Essentially, it was just I wanted to read a popular book from China in a new translation, and that's this one.
So this book was kind of like a big deal when it came out originally, right? It came out in like what, the mid 80s in China, which was
83, 84, something like that.
A few years after, Mao died and his kind of regime was fading. Well, I think he died in 79, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, so this is more in the Dengist
right
era, which
sort of the beginning of reckoning with Maoism in China.
Exactly. Although there's an afterword to this book which claims that that the period immediately following Mao was way more censorious literary wise and in most of the arts, which surprised me. Did you guys do you guys know why that might be? Mean? There was just way more censorship and oversight in looking for subversive elements in the arts.
I mean, it seemed like the interest of the Chinese government at the time, and I hate, again, we'll get into this, but I hate to sort of, I really want to avoid caricature of the Chinese government is just sort of this monolithic one thing with one political ideology and one approach. And I think this book,
why I wanted to read it.
Yeah, and I think this book goes a long way towards complicating that question.
Because I got to say, this is why I wanted to read it, because it feels like there is a contemporary move towards this that makes it relevant now. It's this is where I feel like the positioning of the portrait painted about China at the current moment is all powers are towards that kind of thing, monolithic, horrible, shitty thing.
China.
Exactly. But now the Mr. No Malarkey is doing the same shit.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're just gearing up for the South China Sea.
It's just Cold War round two. I mean, this is except instead of the USSR, it's China now. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Can I ask a really dumb question? Because I apparently know nothing. I know nothing about China at all.
Can you do a Donald Trump China impression?
Yeah.
China.
Yeah,
that's good. That's really good. It's better than Gabe's.
Wow, I'm right here.
I know.
It's the Chinese virus.
I'll tell you to your face, Gabe. Paul did a better job.
After Mao, has the government been what it is? Has the government changed again since after Mao, or has it been constant since then?
What do you mean?
Well, it's been nominally communist since then. That's been the same, but it's been the gradual process of there was a period, I don't know when, again, but of opening to Western influence, where they allowed the importation of Western goods, and the whole Chinese production export market started to open up, and that was a important political development, because in Maoism and immediately afterward, they were still sort of kind of isolationist in terms of their production and stuff like that. But it's still nominally communist, which what it was then. And I think this gets to kind of Matt's point earlier, which is that here we are. First of all, I just want to flag, here we are claiming to know nothing about China and talking about it still 20 minutes in without really talking about the book. But hey, this is what we do. We go off, baby.
It's the context, bro.
And it was kind of, what I think is interesting about this book is that it came out kind of at a tipping point, or a crossroads, I guess, in Chinese history. Are we going to try to consolidate, and this gets to the sort of overly censorious aspect of this period. Are we going to sort of try to consolidate the Maoist legacy, or are we going to repudiate it and move in a different direction? And
that's basically what the first short story talks about. The trees.
Yes, exactly. And the last one, I think.
And the last one, yeah. But King of Trees is kind of a direct criticism and like display of overtaking of that line of thinking, I would say. Maybe we should walk through the story a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I think what it is you're in what is it? You're immediately preceding Mao, so it's a Deng Xiaoping's reign. So it's like a criticism of Maoism during Deng Xiaoping's reign.
You mean after Mao?
Right. It's criticism of Maoism after Mao, the immediate, replacement of Mao. So, yeah, that I don't know. That's a setting, which was apparently more censorship heavy than Mao.
I think because they were concerned to kind of preserve the legacy, because they were aware of. Yeah.
Right. Just meaning that like Ah Cheng as an author, his import is writing in this time where China was like very much like fine-tooth combing artistic output for subversive elements.
Yes.
And which is always an interesting time for artists, because the roundabout ways that they are then going to have to like take to make pretty direct, ultimately, criticisms of the time are interesting and kind of weirdly enough produce good art, good storytelling, which I would say this is a part of that kind of legacy.
Ooh,
Paul,
spicy. Well, I think I just follow up on what Matt was saying for a second, and then we can maybe talk about the stories so Paul can get his spicy takes then.
Yeah.
But I think that certainly the another kind of caveat to add to this is that if you are intimately familiar with Chinese politics or this period in Chinese history, I'm 100% sure that there are references, turns of phrase, and things like that in these texts that will jump out as sort of like politically meaningful that went completely over all of our heads. Right.
Yeah.
That like, again, because he knew this book was going to be read by censors. He knew this book was going to have to go under the microscope. And certain things have to be coded in a certain way and whatever. So I'm sure there's a ton of that in here that we are missing.
Well, in the afterward, they talk about how, certain things were censored. He kind of dabbles in their little sexual acts, but you have to kind of like put the pieces together for yourself to figure out that was actually a sexual act. Like, I didn't really know that. I forget the particular sexual act, but it was in the King of Trees. But in the foreword, the guy talks about, some sexual activity, and I didn't even realize that was what was going on. And I think that points to the censorship that he had to go through.
Yeah, you're not allowed to just sort of be like, they fucked. But what's interesting about, oh shit. Uh-oh. Sorry, everybody. What's interesting is that I don't know. There's been discussion about this kind of thing, right? Like, do the limitations placed on your ability to be explicit about stuff make you think more creatively? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think that's the case for this collection of stories. Like, and the route that Ah Cheng takes is because his own personal history is, once you know that basically he was also from a prominent family of like intelligentsia and high political, so, like the background of his family was one of a very influential kind of intellectual family,
and which those were the people, the academics and the politicians who were sort of most explicitly targeted by Mao.
Exactly. Although apparently Ah Cheng's father was like a pretty devout communist prior, but even so, he eventually was fed up with the restrictions on, in his case, film, and sent to re-education via labor or whatever, like hard labor. So these stories do kind of reflect Ah Cheng's trajectory in a personal sense. Like he was the son of a kind of disgraced former intellectual Beijing kind of person, and was, you know, on the path to a prestigious university and education, and to be another person who is important in the intelligentsia of China, and suddenly he's sent to one of these like State Farm like outposts with the educated youth, quote unquote, to go
like a good neighbor.
I was thinking about that shit. Like, what the fuck? Why is State Farm insurance called that?
Jake.
Huh?
Jake from State Farm. I don't know. I have no idea.
Is that the mascot? Like, it's like, okay, in the book, it's just like, yeah. It's just like a state owned parcel of land that. Why would say, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we've had those in, well, whatever. I'm thinking like land grants and like stuff like that back in the day in America, where there were, I don't know if there were ever state-run farms in the same way, but there certainly were state subsidized farms. There still are.
Should the other caveat be that I turned 33 and I'm fucking lit right now?
Happy birthday, Marl. Can we get a happy birthday for Marl in the chat? Paul,
thanks, guys.
I think you're muted, Paul, for some reason. We got some technical drama for Paul.
He talks big, but then his shit bottoms out all his cool audio stuff.
I just want to say happy birthday to you, Marl, and
thanks, man.
Let's
to 33 more.
To 33 more at least, dude. At least.
The very least. Cheers.
I don't know. There you are, Paul. There you are.
There you are.
All right. So should we go through these stories? Like, how should we do this one by one? I think I have some more big picture things to say, but I think they'll probably come out.
I think I would rather start out by bringing my big picture before we get into it.
All right, do it.
So far, so far we've only been talking about looking at these books or these novellas from one perspective, and that's the historical side only. And I think that that's one way you can read this book. And I think that the other side of it is you have to read it from a prose perspective, and from someone's perspective that doesn't know the history of China at all. And I think that
all three of us.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, you guys obviously know more about China that I haven't spoken a word in like 30 minutes because I have no idea at all about what you're talking about. But
China.
I do think it's okay to, I mean, this is a work of fiction. It's a work of art, and it can be criticized from solely a prose perspective only. So I think,
yeah, of course.
I mean, just going forward, I think we should talk about both sides. Like, it's not only something that relates to history. It should be discussed from a perspective of being an art form. So I think that, I mean, that's one take I had from reading this, is that there are multiple ways of reading this book, but the two that I grasp onto is like the historical perspective and just, you know, the normal reader perspective, which is me. So I want to talk about both sides. I think it's important.
I just want to, I'm going to push back a little bit.
We report, you decide.
Just in the sense that this is so contextual. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's still a work of fiction.
Completely, but it's it's very overtly like analyzing and dealing and coping with a very specific context. So when you talk about like the prose being a certain way to deal with, for instance, censors, you know, I don't know. It's just an element that it I know what you mean. Like it's important to just sort of go in blind in a Rawlsian sense or something, but like ultimately, you know, like that light touch can be appreciated more when you know that it's like because a bunch of fucking like apparatchiks and stuff in some sort of bureaucracy are combing that, and it could mean something really bad if you don't do it right.
Yeah, I think.
Well,
wait. I'm gonna push back on the pushback in a way, but also like. So I think Matt, you're totally right that if you like, if in it coming in with no context, right, reading this, and you could have certainly some moments where you're like, this is overly kind of delicate or overly prissy, like just say they fucked or just say like whatever, and like, but adding that context that Matt is talking about was like, you can't really do that, is helpful. But at the same time, I also worry that kind of like entirely say like making it all about context is in a sort of way like Western chauvinistically problematic, in the sense that like anything from a sort of like alien background is to us, oh, they must only be making some political point, or we can only analyze it from our sort of seat of Western power as a global historical document. And I think that's problematic also, because, you know, like the same sorts of claims could be made about almost literally any text. They're all written in contexts. They're all written in political contexts with political backgrounds, and there are allusions and references that would only be intelligible from a certain, you know, sort of political context. And I think it's tempting to view all sorts of particularly, I think, when it's from a country that has had historically authoritarian regimes like China or a lot of Middle Eastern countries or even Russia or whatever. And of course, there are all these political contexts or these political, you know, implications. But I do think there should be a balance in terms of reading it as literature and reading it as political literature and all that. I mean, it sort of relates to, we don't have to revisit submission, but I think it's the same sort of thing, right? Like, I think a lot of people, not us, if you go back and listen to our last episode, a lot of people want to read a book like Submission and be like, everyone wants to say this book is like political, man, and it's not. It's just like about a dude like going through it, man. And it's not. Of course it's political, right? So of course this book is also political, but it also has the other side, which is that it's about people and it's about human things. And I think that both things can be true at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what I agree with too, is that like I think that both sides of the argument, or both sides of the way you can decipher this book should have a marriage of some kind, or should intertwine in some kind of way. And I don't want to get into it too much just yet, but I don't think it did really all that well.
So was your overall experience not positive? I guess that's my question.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was middle of the road for me. It wasn't positive or negative, really. It was a middle of the road type thing. But one thing I wanted to bring up though was the translation for me. I thought I just feel like reading this, something was lost in the vernacular, in the way that Chinese writing might be compared to like English prose. There rhythmically something was off for me, and there was a lot of like repetitive words that just it threw me off rhythmically while reading it. And I actually just thought it was the translation. I don't think it had anything to do with the writer. but I don't have any proof of that. I just thought like there was something that didn't like sit right with me the way that it read.
Yeah.
And I have some examples of that, but there's like repetitive words, like sentence after sentence, there will be like the same word that'll end each sentence. And it felt like very, very strange to me. I don't know if you guys felt that, but I do have some examples that I underlined. I'll look it up. I gotta find them.
Do you want to? This might be a good time to go into the stories, maybe.
Yeah, let's dive in because we're talking about the writing, and I think it'll be more helpful to get some concrete examples of kind of like the topics and the way the stories play out and all that. So
yeah, so I think we should just go in the same order as the book. So
same.
King of Trees, man. Let's do that one first.
King of Trees. Anyone want to give a quick synopsis?
Again, it's like okay, I'll try it. It's like these the educated youth was just kind of the unofficial name for what, like kids that were in like a primary school who like they had maybe a middle school education or something if you had to westernize it, but
yeah, it was basically a program for, as far as I understand it, which again is not very far, for bringing kind of urban youth who had been educated up to a certain level in China out to the country to learn from the peasantry, to learn from the farmers, to learn from rural people, because that again was kind of like Mao's MO, was trying to sort of curb the decadent lifestyle of the urban elite. And he saw, rural farming and that sort of lifestyle as the way to save, intellectually and morally and economically save China.
Which meant, mostly just like manual labor for teens, basically, which is the context for all three stories, I think, basically.
Yep.
And those are like the main characters are like teenagers who are out there to like clear forests and burn scrub and plant crops and replant quote unquote useful trees and all that kind of stuff. And for this one, okay, so like all three stories I think emphasize like a different element of I don't know, like they're all three of them offer a different angle on the problem that is Mao's approach or the Cultural Revolution's approach, and like what it was that it was destroying or limiting or like steamrolling essentially. This one in particular felt super ecologically conscious. And again, I think like the other important through line is Taoism, which is yet another thing that we are not robustly informed on, but was a big part of Ah Cheng's life through his mom, I believe, who was like a scholar of Taoism. So that's the through line.
Yeah.
As like a major religious belief in China also, it's like hugely important.
Yes. And I don't know a ton about Taoism, but I did write a master's thesis on Buddhism, and there's some interplay between these religions historically, and some of the examples from Taoism were recognizable to me from coming from a background in Buddhism, specifically the example of the butcher carving up the ox without chipping his knife or without denting his knife, because he was so aware of where all the bones were and where the bone junctures were. And that's a sort of that example is throughout a lot of the Eastern religions. It's a very, very common parable.
But in the King of Trees, like the first story, knives and the path of least resistance being a kind of example of, whatever, flow like water.
Yeah. And cooking in all three, or at least two of the stories, was a big deal.
Starvation was a big deal. But like, yeah, I don't know. That was a main theme, was like pretty quickly that story, that parable or whatever you would call it, of like the butcher is brought up.
So these kids are brought to the mountain to try to chop down trees, right? Basically to clear these hills in this area so they can replant it ultimately with quote unquote more useful trees, which is never really defined, which I think is interesting.
Right.
It's never really made clear what more useful trees are. And it sort of speaks to this. And this is something that I think is a sort of common trait of authoritarian regimes, that there's this kind of like churn where you just do things because you do them. There's no, you don't ask for certain explanations and you just do it to get it done, and then you redo it. And I think that came through in this story. But there's this one tree, right? This one big ass tree,
right? Deku fucking tree.
Deku tree that is A, resistant to being cut down, and B, is surrounded by some sort of some local mythology from the local rural peoples, that they think it can't be cut down, or that it's possessed by a certain spirit. And ultimately they do cut it down, but only at the expense of a local man and his family, he was very attached to the tree, and he was in the army during the war, and so it's sort of this like, again, like Matt said, it's very ecological, so it's like progress advancing versus local customs and all that kind of stuff.
I don't even know if he was like particularly attached to the tree or not. His name is Knotty, right? Mr.
Yes, Knotty.
Right. Yeah. Which is funny because when I think of a tree that's hard to cut down, it's a knotty tree. It's like filled with.
Oh, it's knotty.
Yeah, and it's naughty.
It's very naughty. Yeah, I wasn't sure if he was particularly attached to the tree, or if he was just an older person that was more like involved with his traditional side and was like perceiving the tree getting cut down as being like his past getting erased or something like that. So yeah, I mean, was he particularly attached to the tree, or I don't remember that.
I like this because like in the afterword, this story is dismissed as somewhat more simplistic than like the last story, King of Children and stuff. But like, I don't know, like Nadi is the character that seems to embody a bunch of different somewhat contradictory elements, where he's incredibly procedural and rule following, and all this kind of stuff. Like he's a soldier who's like par excellence, who was so good at his job that he also just kind of like ended up condemning a lot of his platoon, I don't know what you'd call them, fellow soldiers, to die and stuff. Right. And then it felt extreme guilt of that. And he lives this incredibly like Spartan, minimalist, ascetic life in these mountains. And he seems to be loath to cut down any tree. He has like no furniture in his little hut, and like his kids and his wife are kind of deprived based on his own sense of what's right.
Six Claws, his kid Six Claws.
His kid Six Claws, who has an extra completely working finger on one of his hands that he uses to pick his nose, which is pretty gross. But
what else are you going to do with an extra finger?
Yeah, dude? What else are you going to do with that last finger?
Well, a lot of the time it just doesn't work. It's just a thing. It's yeah.
Well, I think, Paul, to get back to your question, I think it's both for Nadi. I think he is sort of, I don't think he's necessarily particularly attached to that tree, but that tree for him is representative of sort of the last remnants of a way of life that he sees disappearing, right, in the face of kind of like, Maoist progress. Like it's not that tree specifically, although there are some interesting in the story, some like when the tree is cut down, Nadi gets deathly ill and like right. Sort of in at the exact same time as the tree being chopped down. And so there are those kind of weird coincidences. It never, this book, I wouldn't say this book ever gets into the supernatural or anything like that, although it's hinted at, I would say mostly in this first story, because there's all these sort of local legends and stuff about this tree and about the king of trees.
This is tree spirit. This is a tree spirit.
Right. It's a spirit, right, exactly.
The problem I have with his like illness after the tree is getting cut down is that it felt like too direct of a metaphor. It felt like a children's parable or something. It was like this one old man in the story is surrounded by all these teens is the one person that like has the biggest problem with this tree getting cut down, and once it gets cut down, he gets deathly ill and then dies. So I didn't really see that much like mystery about it. I thought it was just like an overly simplistic metaphor for the old dying and the youth, you know, replanting trees and making a new start. And the few criticisms I read, you know, through various articles and stuff, and in the foreword too, basically mentions that like this story out of the three gets criticized more than the other two. But I kind of agree with it. I think it was a little bit. It was heavy-handed. I thought that the metaphor was a little too heavy-handed for me.
I think that's reasonable. And I mean, I think anytime, like it's hard to do a nuanced take on like, you know, rebirth and cultural regeneration while you're using like explicitly botanical metaphors like that. that gets really kind of trite really fast.
This was Alan Moore's problem with Swamp Thing.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Well, even at the end, the very last couple paragraphs of the chapter talk about Nadi's body like sticking out of the earth. I
actually think that's interesting, because that sort of goes against the like Nadi being the tree spirit, because he asks to be buried. He does die ultimately, and he asks to be buried next to the tree, or where the tree was. The tree ultimately gets chopped down and burned. He asks to get buried where it was, and they bury him there, but the ground basically rejects him, because the roots that still exist, that are still living from the tree, are growing so fast that they basically force his coffin back out again from the ground.
Well, it coincides with like they clear burn the whole mountainside, and then it rains, so he's literally thrown up like vomit. Like his coffin is like spewed out during a torrential downpour, like in a full rejection. It's like pretty graphic.
Which is so interesting, because like, how do we interpret that metaphor, right? Nadi was the tree spirit, right? He tried to defend the tree from getting cut down.
Right.
Initially, he has a connection with the tree. He sort of dies alongside the tree. He asks to be buried at where the tree was, and yet that exact same soil rejects him like in this very unceremonious way, forcing his coffin back up out of the ground. So does that like cement their connection, or is the tree kind of like telling him, dude, you were wrong, like progress should be happening? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it can be read either way.
It's a weird metaphor though, because like that would basically be saying that the tradition is like expelling the tradition, right? It's like expelling himself, because that's what Nadi represents in my perspective. Is Nadi is tradition. It's the old way, and the tree is the old way. So if the roots are expelling basically one-to-one himself, tradition, what the hell does that mean? That really confused me. Like, does that mean the tree and the roots that like signify tradition don't agree with what it is?
Or maybe it's a sort of thing where, because like the roots are still viable, right? They're still growing after the tree is chopped down, and so it maybe it's
and
a
Nadi
statement.
Has no hope,
right?
Or they could be rejecting his death, which could be more in the positive realm of it.
Or it could be a sort of statement about, it could be a kind of like radical centrism about the compatibility of these things, right? The roots the roots representing the tradition can still grow and be fertile, but we don't have to totally reject progress and reject sort of a forward thinking attitude. Because if Nadi, it represents kind of like a kind of reductive, like progress bad, like Luddite attitude, I think the roots rejecting him while also in the process of thriving can be a way to sort of say, like, these things can be compatible. We can keep our roots, and we can keep the roots healthy, and they can keep growing while also allowing for progress in a way that might be in challenging tradition in some ways, but keeping that base, the root.
Right, like take into consideration who you've cast aside in order to take this new path, the like cultural revolutionary path. Like I do think that, right, because like the criticism of this story was one of yeah, like maybe centrism or something, like because and it's interesting in light of the next two stories, which seem way more dark and straightforwardly critical.
Yes.
And this feels, I think you're right, Paul, like a little confused, or not confused, but just maybe hopeful or something in the regime change. It's like, I have these doubts, like I think there's a lot, you're throwing certain babies out with certain bathwater. Like I see how there's a negative to this where I just don't agree with the propagandistic kind of blanket praise for everything that's happening. But ultimately, I think that like it must, or it'll be a fine alternative. And then the next couple stories, I think, fully refute that as a possible position.
In particular, the King of Chess, which was my favorite. But yeah, I think that oh my God, I just totally lost my thought.
No, it's fine.
So sorry.
No, we
had a really good one too.
We can talk about the King of Chess. I mean, one thing that I think is interesting before we like move to the King of Chess, maybe, is that I think that this story is really one of the other things that's distinct about this first story is that the main character, the narrator, is not very important
No.
at all. That's sort of true about the King of Chess as well.
Yeah.
So I guess the first two, but the role of the narrator varies kind of wildly across all of these three stories. Like in this first story, he's basically kind of an observer. Like he sort of befriends Six Claws. He kind of befriends Nadi's son, and he brings him candies and various things like that. But the story's not really about him in any meaningful way.
Yeah, and it's the same in the King of Chess too, for the most part. And I don't know if there's a term for this type of narrator, but in my head, I was calling him the everyman narrator, because I almost feel like in both the first and the second story, there were so many other characters in the village or whatever that could have been the main narrator. It didn't really matter who he was. It mattered a little bit more in the King of Chess, but still, it was just like it's sort of like an omnipresent narrator that was kind of tied to who the story was actually about.
Yeah,
it was a weird way of storytelling.
I personally really liked it. But I know what you mean, Paul. I think we've encountered it before in some form or another, like this sort of de-emphasized, blandly congenial eyeball, right? I'm failing to like say exactly what that, like, when, but like just
I don't know if we have these two. The first two stories felt like very different than any of the other books we've read so far, and I think it's mostly because like we've read stories with, like, obviously the narrator being the main character, but the main characters in the first two stories don't have very much characterization at all.
Right.
And I think that's the major difference, is like there's little to no characterization about the narrator. But Yeah, I can't think of another story that
I mean,
read.
I think it's a reductive and potentially problematic comparison, but in some ways it's like, at least descriptively, a lot of these stories did remind me of The Miner, which is a guy from a city going to a kind of poor area and sort of trying to assimilate with the culture there, and being like variously ostracized and made fun of, and having, you know, various sorts of troubles. That one is obviously more narrator focused, and he is characterized in a more like robust way than in certainly the first two stories. Like, I think The King of Children is a totally separate thing from these first two, but I thought there was a similar vibe there, and it feels bad to say, because it's like, oh man, the Asian authors that we've read,
right? Japan,
but
China,
I do, yeah,
same.
but I do think there's the same kind of like thing happening in some ways.
Well, what I think the twist of there is at least for the first two stories, is I think you do it. What's kind of interesting is like you do get a background for the narrator first, and then they are cast into more of a choral role where they're just kind of, they are the the subjectivity that's
they're like a vessel.
Yes, exactly right. But what sets them apart is like you get personal details about their why they're there and their circumstance, and there's they occasionally will, like, Ah Cheng will like throw to a random personal history, and then jump back to the present to provide like what I would regard as just sort of like emotional content, and to the again, the context of it. It's very straightforward. You're still jumping through time, but in like somehow a straightforward way. And then eventually these people fade into the background as the actual protagonist, not the narrator, is brought into the picture, which is interesting. It's not something I've experienced really either.
Yeah, I mean, you said straightforward, and I think that Ah Cheng's writing style overall for me was very, especially in the first story, it was very, very straightforward. I almost like, I wrote down in my notes that it felt, for the first half of it, it felt like an Eagle Scout's journey.
Yeah,
it is. I think
that's basically what it was.
Is that the what? Is that the like the YA equivalent of the hero's journey?
Right?
Yeah, I didn't really know what to make of it until, you know, things got a little more interesting towards the end of King of Trees. But yeah, for the first like 3/4 of it, I was like, am I just reading the Chinese Eagle Scouts handbook right now?
Can I read a little bit from
knife this, knife this? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, yeah, knife. Yeah, there's a lot about sharpening knives in these stories, and cooking, and
who chops down a tree with a knife?
I'm assuming they're talking about like big kind of like machetes,
yeah.
You know?
And this is another thing that added to what I thought was a lack of a great translation.
I cannot. I don't feel comfortable commenting on the translation. Frankly, I don't speak Chinese. I have absolutely no clue.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's.
I think there's shit that doesn't. I think there's also shit that just genuinely doesn't translate in a lot of
which is
languages.
Interesting, because the last story is it's not about translation, but it's about the Chinese language, The King of Children.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to read it. I just feel like I just want to give people a sense of the writing. This is from towards the end of The King of Trees. This is when, as Matt talked about before, they were sort of like burning the mountains, like burning everything they had chopped down. And Six Claws, who is Nadi's son, sees an animal, a muntjac, which is an animal that I had not heard of before this.
What is it?
I don't know. It's just like it's like
I know what it is. I looked it up. It's a deer that makes like a weird sound.
Yeah, it's like a deer.
Native. I think it's called like the barking deer. So it barks.
God,
and
that sounds kind of fat. Terrifying.
It's kind of like a fat deer.
cute, maybe also.
I'm just picturing a deer going. It sounds so scary.
Like, have you ever heard a rabbit scream? It's one of the scariest things I've ever.
Oh, that's the worst noise on planet Earth. A rabbit screaming.
Okay, muntjac. Yeah, I've actually. Yeah.
So
it is cute.
Okay, so this is them burning the mountain, and I thought this description was just really. I actually thought it was beautiful. I mean, we're talking about his writing as being straightforward, but I thought this was subtle and beautiful and sort of. I hate the term pregnant, but loaded in ways that I maybe don't grasp.
If you say
my wife just heard me say pregnant and just goes ew from the other room.
Yeah, I said ew in my head too. Like,
Gabe,
why'd you say
just say gravid and it sounds way more literal.
Gravid? Does that mean pregnant?
Yes.
Oh, I learned you learn something new every day.
Is that like when a rocket's like a gravel? Like is that like when a rocket's pregnant?
I love Pokemon, dude. Graveler.
Shut up.
Okay. Suddenly, Six Claws cried out shrilly, "Oh, a muntjac, a muntjac!" Hastily scanning the flames, I spotted on the brightly lit mountaintop a tiny muntjac scrambling back and forth. It leaped up in the air repeatedly, tracing a curve, and then as soon as it landed, would twist around and dash away again. The others saw it and raised a loud cry that soared and faded in the torrid air. The fire was closing in on the summit. The muntjac finally came to a halt, kneeled down on its forelegs, and dropped its head. We were holding our breath, waiting for the final glimpse of it, when, to our astonishment, the creature drew itself erect, lifted its head to form a straight line with its neck, and reared up on its hind legs. Before we realized what was happening, the muntjac shot like an arrow toward the fire, kicking up a spring of sparks, and with a final leap fell sideways into the flames and vanished. The next instant, the fire swept over the summit. Two sheets of flame clashed, soaring so high into the sky that we had to tilt our heads as far back to see. The apex of the flame licked the crimson air. I now understood that I had never really seen fire or destruction before and knew even less of rebirth.
And
I think
I underline that passage too.
And I just think that seems like such a politically like weighty moment where he's talking about Maoism and cultural destruction and rebirth, and it's like all wrapped up in this mountain burning. And I thought it was beautiful.
That was probably the most politically charged sentence of the whole book for me. I underlined that passage too.
I agree, man. Yeah.
Before that last line though, the description of the muntjac running away from the hunters actually reminded me most of how I play Overwatch and get killed all the time.
All right, let's hear it.
Like running away from the flames, and
muntjac
then I
Paul.
Panic, and then I jump into the flames, and then I die, and that's when I weak. Matt, you don't know this about my last day or so, but I actually did not sleep last night.
Okay.
I woke up yesterday at 1 p.m. and then I played Overwatch from 11 p.m. until 4 a.m. and I was like, I can't go to sleep. So I've been awake for a very long time. I probably should have prefaced that in the beginning of the podcast, but I feel a little bit crazy tonight.
I'm drunk as shit. That's the other thing for me too. So we're all good, man.
We're all in the best possible headspace to discuss a nuanced book about a political context we don't understand.
We were just talking about how this requires a very light touch. We're all just like fucking like blah, blah.
I feel like I'm at a Regents exam. I just threw up all over my desk.
Oh shit. So the King of Chess.
Well, hold on. I want a couple more things about the King of Trees, right? It is the most, I think you're right. It is the most overt, just sort of comparison between like the metaphor and like what's being discussed, right? Like the forest and new growth and these ancient trees being like the old way, and certain people who are deserving of regard still finding sustenance and value and their life force being kind of attached to the old ways, and how you're losing good people through this political action. And we didn't really talk about Lily, who is I think like the kind of weird representative of what would be considered like the bridge between that or something. Like, again, because Gabe, you talked about like the purging of the degenerate intellectual like elite.
That was your word.
Well, no, you said it too.
Did I say? Yeah, but yes, that was the attitude. Yeah.
I obviously I don't. I don't think.
Yeah, I'm fucking.
But like, Lily is described as bringing this giant treasure chest of books with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like that, there's a lot made of that, I think it's basically all like condoned works.
A lot of it is like explicitly written by Mao himself, like the sayings and the essays and
right.
Which is odd to me because Lily is the one that like is the go-getter to try and to cut down the big tree. The king.
Well, that makes sense though, because he's all for cultural progression and like doing away with the old ways. I mean, the one of the
Wait, I thought you said that the books I thought you said the books he had were Mao's books.
Yeah.
Like, but
right.
Mao is the one that is out of power now, right?
No. These all take place during Mao's reign, or like the beginning of that whole thing. Mao is in power for what, a decade? 76 to 96 or something like that. Fuck.
I'll resign myself from talking about anything China from here on out, which is.
It was a fairly short period of.
No, Mao was in power from the 50s to the late 70s, I think,
But the Cultural Revolution itself, I mean.
Wait, when was the Great Wall made?
I think Matt Damon was involved in the construction.
I think Tom Cruise was The Last Samurai.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh God.
Okay, we're going off the rails. But yeah,
Lily was representative of that bridge of like the zealous vanguard.
Yeah, and I was one of the things that I learned from reading this story and this book in general, but introducing the first story, was this concept of the four olds. Like that was one of the things that was constantly kind of like people were tense about. Like we had to get rid of this book because it was one of the olds, or we had to get rid of this idea because it was one of the olds. And under Maoism, and this was news to me, the four olds, or the four old things, were like basically a kind of shorthand for bad or reductive old traditional ideas that needed to get rid of, and they were old ideas, old culture, old habits, and old customs. And I don't know enough about Chinese history or culture to kind of like distinguish shit like habit and custom. I don't know what the distinction is there, and like whatever, but that was the official list of the olds, and that comes through a lot in these stories.
Yes, and it's like overtly mentioned too, which is like people get uncomfortable when they see something.
That's
like
one of the olds.
I think Lily has one of a book that falls under one of the four olds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's brought up like in some form, I think, in all three stories.
I think so.
In a negative way, and by that I mean like in a way where it's censorship. It's reducing the scope of like human experience, and it's bad.
Are you saying Ah Cheng is Chinese intellectual dark web?
Oh my God. How dare you? This was good. If anything is gonna piss people off, it's that.
I know. That's gonna be the one clip of our show that ever gets famous.
Yeah, Ah Cheng is actually just sort of Sam Harris, Chinese Sam Harris.
Dave Rubin, Chinese Dave Rubin.
Oh no,
it's not true. Definitely not true. We don't agree with that.
That's the most I've been uncomfortable.
Should we talk about the King of Chess?
Yeah.
Paul, you said this was your favorite one?
Yes.
Why? What's it about? Why'd you like it?
It is about a village dweller, young chess player who is very skilled at chess, and
Wang Yisheng.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they always say his full name when they talk about him.
Yes.
But yeah, it's told from this secondary narrator again, like as in the King of Trees, But it's about this kid who is just like really, really obsessed with chess. He had a bad family life and upbringing. I think his one of his parents died, and he basically gets like a subsidy from the government, and it's very low, and he's just like dirt poor, but he just kind of like travels around and tries to learn about chess because he loves chess. But he also learns from one of these chess masters that you if you're really good at chess, you cannot twist that into making money off of chess. It's only about the art of learning and the art of chess. That's all it is. So if you need to make money, you have to do it in a different way. And I think that relates to Taoism.
Yes.
But basically he kind of levels up like in God of War, which I've been playing on PS4. And he ends up beating this kind of ritzy asshole guy named Tall. Is it Tall Balls?
Tall Balls.
One of my favorite names
So
for
funny.
a guy.
There are so many funny nicknames.
We haven't talked about this at all yet, but there are so many funny names in this fucking book.
Yes.
We haven't even gotten to the best one, which is in The King of Children.
Was it Bean Sprouts?
No, I don't want to say it yet.
Oh yeah, okay. He almost said it, but he didn't.
Yeah, but Tall Balls is my favorite name.
I actually think Tall Balls is the GOAT in terms of names.
Yeah, it's my favorite. Yeah,
it's a tall guy. It's a tall. Okay, guys, I know you've been like, what? It's a very tall guy, and so his balls are high off the ground.
Oh, they're tall. They're taller. I get that.
Yeah, and that's the why.
Shouldn't he been have called High Balls?
High Balls.
I'm high as balls.
Yeah.
Gabe, shut up.
Just saying it could have been better.
Gabe.
Nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect. Improve. Maoism.
Way. Wow. Maoism.
But yeah,
Gabe loves Mao Zedong.
Mao Zedong balls.
Oh shit. Okay. Well,
immature jokes about dicks and balls. But yeah, what else happens in this story? Basically, he what's his name?
There's a tournament.
Totally
Wang Yisheng.
Yeah, it's a tournament.
There's a chess tournament, and he it's a weird one because the narrator is not the focus, but we also are viewing it through the narrator's eyes the whole time.
It's a little more relatable than the King of Trees narration. He's like he has a friendship.
Yes.
With what's his nickname again? The chess player?
Chess Fool.
Chess Fool, which I also love.
Yisheng.
Oh my god. To me, that's second place. Chess Fool. I love that. It's so funny. But he has more of a friendship with Chess Fool. And they have this relationship together, and they're kind of like, the narrator is conscious of Chess Fool's journey and his whereabouts, and very interested in him and loves talking to him about whatever. Chess Fool is a very eccentric person who has very strange and odd habits that I found very amusing. One thing that was funny and disgusting was how he ate food, ate rice like an animal.
But he also has to eat every single grain, right? It's very methodical and
borderline. I hate. I don't. Maybe I shouldn't even bring this up, but it was borderline autistic to me, and I think that related to the chess playing.
Go listen to our episode. Go listen to the Last Samurai episode if you want to hear more of our thoughts on autism and chess genius.
Well, I actually think that book does dovetail into the last story.
Every book is a sequel to the other books.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting and humanizing and was in every story again was because we keep describing this structure of the story where there's a character we're introduced to who's the narrator, who we get some background on, and there's some interpersonal interactions with like other people, and then the protagonist enters, and that except for the last story, which is a bit different, but
yeah, I would argue very different.
Very different. But the first two follow this same structure, where the emphasis leaves the observer, the narrator. But one of the consistent things is one of the positives is like how easily friendships arise and how strong they become, and how like camaraderie folks are, and there's just this sense of bonhomie, and like there's almost like a Mannerbund going on, like this kind of like dudes rock again, like kind of thing.
Very dudes rock.
Where like strong bonds and like emotions are attached to the people you meet in these circumstances.
I think like for me, that was one of my, not even specifically about King of Chess. Like I have some other thoughts about this story specifically, but that is one of my big takeaways from this book that I deeply appreciated was, and I said this in my very short like reading vlog that I did on our Patreon. So if you guys want to go check that out, it's patreon.com/spinecrackers, where you can hear our initial thoughts and some of the books that we're reading sometimes. One of the things that I loved about this book was that it walked the line. I think it's so easy to be like, oh, if you live under one of these authoritarian, like fucked up regimes, whether it's Saddam Hussein or Hitler or Mao or whoever, it's easy to just put everybody into the category of like, either you're 100% a victim, or you are 100% a sort of like Eichmann, like banality of evil, like just like thoughtlessly executing the directives of the authority. You're either in one of those two camps. And this book, I thought, did such a good job of showing that it is not either of those things. Like you can be in both and neither of those categories at the same time. And I think that was kind of just that just struck me as really important, because I think like we've had how many years of literature doing that about things like the Holocaust, doing that things about like American expansion, frankly. Mm-hmm. And we need that. I think we need to read those sorts of texts for some of these lesser known regimes that get lumped in with that same sort of conversation. But like it's not one thing or the other.
But what's crazy is not lesser known, right? Like we all know true. Mao. Like China. It's not even some minute,
China.
Everyone kind of knows who Mao Zedong is and what the Cultural Revolution was.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know. I would say it falls more in line with like in ways, in terms of emphasis and whatever, like the Hitler comparison.
Yes. So all I mean to say is that humanizing was the word for me for this book.
Okay.
Yeah, I did get that sense of humanizing, but I think I have a more pessimistic view of it. In the afterword, they talk about how people form these camaraderie relationships during this time period that like they think fondly of even to this day, or whatever. I forget the actual terminology of what the passage was, but like these relationships lasted a very long time to these people, and they were really important to these people, these friendships and these bromances or whatever. But I don't know. I actually found it kind of depressing. I found it kind of like post 9/11, when the country was like very much like holding hands for a few months or a year or so. And I kind of saw that as like this post-revolutionary group of people for a series of years having this camaraderie relationship. But we, I don't know that much about China, but it has turned into what it is now, and it's not all that great.
China.
So they were having this like romantic, like revolutionary viewpoint at the time of change, but it didn't really amount to anything that all that revolutionary or utopian. And I don't know if they expected that or not, but I don't know. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic about it, but I thought that like not that the relationships were fake in any way or that they weren't like human, but it still made me a little sad just knowing the.
Not only do I not think you're wrong, I think you're not disagreeing with Ah Cheng.
Okay.
I think that's the appropriate response is what you're having.
Yeah.
I don't think when we describe like these kind of like foxhole friend camaraderie relationships being struck up that you can look at nostalgically in the 80s and go like, you know, there was something to extract there that was meaningful. That's not to say that like I think overwhelmingly the stories are still like it was shit.
Yes.
And we lost something human in that decade. And that's supposed to be the takeaway.
To simplify it to like to two other, you know, different perspectives, I would say that like being at summer camp is a similar thing. Like you kind of get like corralled into a group of people and you're just destined to have a relationship with these people, probably.
Right.
And I would also say the other more depressing side would be like being in a concentration camp. You're probably going to have a you're probably going to have a deeply rooted friendship and relationship with someone you're in a camp, you know, and those are the two extremes. I feel like this is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I think
that term like foxhole relationship is I haven't heard that before, but that's a good term.
Yeah, and I think that again, like the tone of these stories is not laudatory. It's not like celebratory. It's deeply melancholy. Like it's deeply like sad, and you know, I think Chang is not. He's not a political philosopher. He's just sort of making political points obliquely through the realities of relationships. You know what I mean? And it reminds me in a way, you know, everything's a sequel to everything else, of the review we did 2 weeks ago of Guibert, where he was describing these sorts of perverse but also meaningful relationships that were formed during the AIDS crisis, and like it was formed under fucked up shit conditions, and like some of the like priors were really problematic, but they were still meaningful. And I feel like that is sort of kind of what Cheng is giving us with a lot of the relationships that are described in these stories, including this one with the chess fool and his narrator friend.
And I think that's partially the product of the awareness that there were bureaucratic censors observing what he would write and approving or not approving its publication. Like that's what we mean by it creating this kind of finesse to the art of his writing, where he threads the needle in a way that's pretty impressive, where you are confused. You're like, is he positive or negative about these things? Like, is he criticizing or not? You know, that's all I think just incredibly intentional. And, you know, what's the joke my brother made about copyright? If it's unclear, you're in the clear.
Like, that's great. That's a great line. Which brother? You have
shout out to Jacob Torby.
Jacob Torby.
Oh, did you just out your last name?
I mean, it's my Twitter name and everything.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. You're right. It's your name is on your Twitter.
I'm not really that anonymous. I kind of
Paul's last name is Jones, by the way.
Yeah, it is. Matt, you have no skeletons in the closet. I have about 100,000. So
Paul, our entire audience just went challenge accepted.
Right. Yeah.
4chan's gonna be like eating out my butthole by the morning. My point being
that I think that confusion is also built in as a feature, not a bug. Like Ah Cheng what I find to be remarkable about these stories, and is commented upon in the afterword and everything, is like a lot of really diametrically opposed people kind of post-mortem picking apart this time period in China, all found something to like about these stories, or that supported their thesis about what was going on at this time. And in a kind of inverse relation to people saying like, look at who I'm pissing off, literally everybody, which means that I'm on the right track. It's like
cough Welbeck.
Well, no. I'm sorry. No. Because that's a bad. Because I think Welbeck, whatever. What I'm trying to say is more like the inverse of that is, look at all these people I'm pleasing. Like, it's people that should be fighting. And like, I don't know if that's tracks with you guys, but like
radical centrism, dude.
No, I mean, I
I think that tracks with what I meant. Like, Welbeck's whole thing is like, oh yeah, I'm making everybody mad, therefore I'm right, or
I'm bad boy.
Yeah. And
this is
the opposite of that.
I guess right totally is the wrong phrase. It's the wrong phrase I'm trying to get at, though. Maybe
left. Like, are you trying to say left?
Welbeck is definitely not that.
No, he's not.
I think Ah Cheng is more in the camp of. I mean, you know what? Who knows, right?
I mean, to be honest, like
he's a living writer. Like,
is he alive still? He was born in 1940.
Yeah, he's in his 70s or something, I think, right? Okay. Or maybe he's later.
But to be honest, the line, Gabe, that you quoted earlier, that I said was my favorite line that I already forgot. That we all
about the muntjac running through the flames.
Yeah, but the very last line of that quote, about it was very political.
That I know nothing of destruction and even less of rebirth or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that was in the first story, and after I read that, I was like, I know where this guy's political motivations lie. So it was in that moment where I was like, I know this writer. But Matt, what I was trying to say was that, like, my criticisms of the actual writing are I don't know.
Go for it, man.
My criticism for like the whole thing that turned me off did seem to be this sort of lost in translation moment. That was the only thing I could point to, and that it's like a mild criticism, because like overall I think there's a lot of beautiful writing. There's a lot of really beautiful passages that I underlined and I thought were really awesome, but I think there was something that was lost.
And but why do you think that like affected you to the degree that it did, as a negative?
Maybe because I just read a Murakami short story and I love him so much that I was like, I want every book to be a Murakami story.
I don't know, man. Again, we were just talking about this. Like, it's not really great to be like, okay, a Japanese author and a Chinese author.
No, I relate Murakami to any author. No, I'm kidding, to be honest. It was just like a.
But there is a straightforwardness to the writing that is like comparable.
There was a lack of rhythm. That's the only way I can describe it. There was a lack of like lyrical rhythm in a lot of the passages, but not all of them. Like I said, there's a lot of really beautifully well-written pages. But I would say that over 50% of the dialogue, or just the general descriptions, I found like too direct, and there was like repeating words that were odd to me. I actually underlined one. I'm going to find it, but I underlined one sentence that was a clear. It was like incorrect English. I
actually know. I agree with you. There were a couple typos in the book, in my copy of the book.
Yeah. So I mean, can you point to that just being a typo, or I mean, this is why I'm like,
I can, because it was just like, it was literally like they misspelled and forgot to add like an N, things like that.
Yeah.
Like really basic shit.
Okay.
Or there was like a conjunction that wasn't there in maybe twice. In
New directions. If you don't want to sponsor the show, you can hire us as copy editors.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, we read the whole fucking book and there were some typos, man. It's not a joke. Like there are.
maybe I added those typos to like some sort of narrative forming in my mind about the translation or something. Maybe they were just typos. I don't know.
Well, no, because I your larger point is taken. Like, I genuinely believe that the lost in translation thing really is true for certain cultures, like turns of
for certain languages.
Really. Gabe gave me this sort of icked out look.
Well, I mean, no, it's true, but I think we shouldn't like it's true like between United States, like if you read some shit that's written in like Louisiana Creole versus fucking Boston whatever, you're gonna have problems translating certain terms or certain turns of phrase or certain colloquialisms or whatever. So I think I again, I want to like resist overstating the kind of like, oh, because it's like Chinese and weird that it's extra weird. You know what I mean?
No, right. I don't want to. I didn't want to put that across. I think culture is a word that applies to state lines and all that kind of stuff. I just mean like connotation. Like connotation makes things crazy. Like, you know, there's a racist term for natives in Australia that has no weight in America and vice versa. You know what I mean? It's like you just don't feel that pang in your gut, you know, to use a really like overt example. But I think that's an example of what I mean is like just like you don't feel it. You don't feel it in your gut when you say it or when you read it.
I don't think that's, to me, it's not like outlandish to say something like this. Like when languages can be so different, the translation can be like incredibly. You guys are making faces at me. Matt just went la 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 to me.
No, we're just memeing. We're just making meme faces. When you when you say I'm going to say something controversial about a culture, I do make a meme face.
Yeah, just power through it.
Well, I'm just saying, like, okay, like for example, Murakami he's written books in English, but he also like I feel like that's a really big advantage for him to write in two different languages, because if he wants to evoke the same emotion that he wrote in Japanese, maybe he has to change a whole sentence around to make the same feeling that he got in the Japanese version into the English version. And I think that
it shouldn't be a requirement of authors, though, that they should write in English just because we're.
I'm not saying.
I don't think that's what Paul's saying.
I'm not saying that at all. It could be from French to frickin', I don't know, Hindu. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying that I'm talking about the rhythm of the actual reading experience for me, and I felt it was like choppy for me in a lot of ways. Or
well, this was
abrupt. It was like abrupt at a certain point, and then like there was a full fleshed out beautiful paragraph, and I mean, I don't know what else I can say other than rhythmically it felt a little bit like strange to me.
I think those strained sentences, and this is what I was trying to get at initially, are not the result of translation so much as, again, the context of its writing. Like, this is why I was trying to say that it was important that like Deng Xiaoping was like the you know, the ruler at the time who was really hammering down against, you know, I apparently he lightened up a bit. But like I think that has more to do with the strained feel I think you're describing towards some of the sentences as being really veiled criticisms.
And importantly, veiled in ways that we are not equipped to understand.
And then and then also veiled in valences that are not as like easily picked up by our ear.
Okay, well, okay. Let me backtrack a little bit and just try to explain my issue from a different perspective. Like, take away the translation issue. If I'm just reading, I'm going to read this.
We can't do that, by the way. Derrida, language, translation.
We can't do it.
Well, no, we can, but I just mean like when you sign up to read a book in translation, something's lost, like regardless, right?
Okay, well that's my whole point.
I know, but I'm saying like I don't know. That was true. That was true when we read Welbeck. That was true when we read Simenon. That's true when we read any text in translation from any language into any other language. Something is lost, and we are not equipped to know what it is. And yes, I guess I'm just pushing back on like, why is it specifically bothering you about this text and none of the others that we've read in translation?
Well, but the first thing I want to say is that I don't even know if, like what Matt is saying, I don't even know if it is the translation that is bugging me. I'm just hypothesizing that it could be that. But two, I think that things can be lost in translation in different degrees. So if, like, I don't know, maybe it's easier to translate a French novel to English than it is Chinese to English. You know, the dialect is very different, the language, the writing, everything.
Yeah,
everything.
No, that's probably true to a degree.
There's a much greater difference. But let me just read. You might think this is not weird at all, but I read these lines and I felt that this happened a lot in this book to me.
What story is this?
It's on page 22.
Okay.
And it's The King of Trees. And it's the first big paragraph down. It's just 2 lines. While we were chatting, Lily stood up, gripped his knife, and slowly approached the big tree. Everybody stopped talking and watched him circle the tree. That's it for me. And this kind of like 2-sentence, I don't know. This happened a lot to me, where it's like a sentence would end with one word, and then the next sentence or a sentence after that would end with the same word, and it would like repeat over and over, and it felt very, very strange to me. And I was, the way you guys are looking at me right now, I can tell you guys are like, you think I'm crazy. But no. when I was reading this and I noticed this, I was like, this is bugging me, and I don't think it's going to bug Matt or Gabe, but it actually is really bugging me. And it happened a lot in these pages too with knife. Like, he kept saying the word knife, and it felt like I was reading a C-list sci-fi novel. Like, the writing to me just felt really, really bad in certain areas of this book, but in other areas I thought it was really beautiful. So I'm just trying to state the criticism that I had, but it's not like, I don't know.
I think I'm going to just jump in first because I suspect Matt has more to say about this than I do. I will just say in general, I'm a shit critic of prose because you're right. I do not notice it that much. I am way, 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 way more over on the like thematic political context side of things, to the point that the writing is something that I don't notice as much. Like, I'm like, if you're asking, like, I can spot fucking misspellings and typos and shit like that, but like the quality of the prose or whatever, I don't really give a shit. Not really kind of my wheelhouse. So you are correct that it did not bug me as much as it bugged you.
I give a lot of shits about the quality of the prose. I just think that when it marries with what Gabe's talking about, that's when you have something like that's like incredible. But for this instance, again, I don't know. We've made too much over our ignorance. So whatever, right? You get it. Like, we don't know.
We're dum-dums. We get it.
We don't we don't understand Chinese culture. We don't understand Taoism even enough. However, I do think that he's writing in the same vein as these sort of parables, or whatever you want to call them, like the butcher parable, right? Like, again, the re-emphasis on Taoism, I think, is important, because I think the repetition and the simplicity as something that is both able to couch so much meaning that can evade censorship and appear wholesome or whatever you want to call it, right? Like educational or pure, to censors, and be revolutionary and be critical and all this kind of stuff, is the origin of repeating phrases, simplicity in these ways that feel alien. And I don't know, that's my take on it, and why it didn't bug me stylistically, because I was like, I feel like I'm reading, again, almost a religious text in certain cases.
Yes, and I would also say, to bring it back to specifically the King of Chess, right? Because like I think Cheng is weaving in the Taoist principles both in his writing and performance of the text and in the explicit discussions in the text, right? We talked about this sort of butcher example in the King of Chess. The chess fool recounts his sort of learning of chess from like this garbage hunter guy,
right,
who like explicitly couches it in Taoist principles, right? That you have to have a like wide view of the strategy and not the tactics, and or it might be the inverse of that, I forget.
No, you're right, yeah.
And I think that Cheng is doing that also in his writing as well. So I don't know.
Well, let me just respond. I mean, I think that, Matt, you're right. Like, I think that this is what I believe, is that like the two different perspectives need to be married in a way, because if I just look at from my one only prose white boy perspective that knows nothing about China and the history, I mean, which is what I did. I didn't know about the censorship. I didn't know about the Taoism aspect of simplicity. So if that did relate to his writing style, then it makes more sense to me. So that totally flips my perspective on the writing style for sure. And I can think about it in a different way, and I can give it a lot more leeway.
Yeah,
which is what this podcast is all about: learning and growing.
Fuck, that's facts. That's actually wholesome facts.
Do you want to cut for a second? Yeah. So like it improved, right? Like hearing that kind of stuff like improves your I don't know, your experience of it. We were kind of talking off mic about how, it's an interesting phenomenon, right? Because like having more or less information about context, historical background, like, the nuances of religious meaning and parable and all this kind of stuff can kind of have like any and all effect on your experience phenomenologically of the text and all that kind of stuff. But I think what encapsulates that, or like puts a frame around it, is the Taoist principle of be like water. No, like right, like the main antagonist, if there is one, of all three stories seems to me to be like a prescriptive, mechanistic tyranny, right? Like you the main problem is you must do this and there's no nuance, which again I wish I had a little more background on, but feels like a kind of sub argument between like Taoism and Confucianism or something, right? Like it's almost like at the heart of all of these stories, even though they're political and about the Cultural Revolution and sort of the directives from Mao,
right,
are kind of more or less religious differences a little bit.
Well, and it's interesting because it's in the context of the Cultural Revolution. Again, whatever. I'm done caveating my ignorance. I'm an idiot. Yeah, I don't understand any of this.
We got it.
My impression is that the sort of Taoist approach that Cheng is evincing in these stories became the equivalent of the Confucian approach that like Confucianism is always like the extreme level of conservatism in China, right? It's always that's the tradition.
That's what I meant. It's conservative, liberal.
That's the bedrock of
a little
conservatism
bit.
in China. And sort of Taoist thinking was moving in a different direction, and it had different political implications, and was sort of like the radical liberal thing for a while. And you know, then Maoism came along, and it was all explicitly about progress, explicitly about doing away with tradition. And like Cheng's approach here is like it's almost like this, you know, it's this Overton window thing, right? Where like now the Taoist stuff that Cheng is talking about is conservative in the context of revolutionary Maoism. And you're right that there's this sort of internal or sub conservative disagreement between Confucianism and Taoism. But like there is almost a weird, like I meant to ask you guys this, and we still have a whole other story to talk about, but is Cheng's point sort of like we must return to tradition point, and is that problematic and worrisome?
I actually didn't get that. I didn't get that from him at all. I thought that he was on the different side of the spectrum without really giving it even many clues about his political identity. But I thought there were enough clues to point me in the direction of like, no, tradition is bad, and this new regime is bad also. I don't know. It was more like a vibe I got from him, just like, I don't know what the right answer is, but the past government was bad. Whatever's happening now is also not great. But it's not like he gave an answer, but I think he was definitely anti-tradition.
I'm gonna be honest. I got one of the most polarizing takes, which is Eumsville.
That was almost a spit take. That was almost a spit take. I just drank some wine. I was gonna go.
Right.
That would be barf.
Right. There's the identification of the problems of the current approach towards society and politics and history in China at the time, but he's not pro it, obviously. Very obviously.
This is why you like Norm Macdonald. Do you know that?
Go on.
Because Norm Macdonald sits. I mean, I like Norm Macdonald too. I've grown to like him, but I feel like Younger is he's kind of Norm of the. He's kind of like Norm, just like sitting. Like Younger is just like, or what's his name? What's his name? Norm.
Who? What?
Norm is like an anarchistic. Like, I'm in this.
He's not. He's a Catholic Canadian.
I see him as an anarchistic comedian, though. Doesn't matter what his like actual identity is to him. It's like
how I would describe this, and I think this invites everyone to speak, is somebody who has, disagreements or not, somebody who has a baseline perspective that allows them to then clown on all people, which, like, I think objective ethics is something.
We're talking about radical centrism. This is just radical centrism, right?
No, because fucking rad libs suck ass. And
no, not radical liberal, rad centrists.
Rad sense? Yeah, maybe we're talking, I don't know. Like, but just more like there's a, I don't know, man, like this is so like thin atmosphere territory. Like I feel weird. But do you know what I mean? Like someone because I think Ah Cheng is not necessarily innocent of this, which is like the Tao being something like, I don't know, maybe Norm gets with Christianity or whatever, or somebody might get with like objective ethics, a baseline that allows you to kind of critique a lot of things and confuse people by your critique of all those things, because it might seem like you would be in the camps that were pro those things, but you're operating on a your frame is larger. Your frame is larger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
I would also say that, I mean, I think the best way to read this book is you need a large frame, right? Which relates
to Killing Commendatory.
Oh God! Wow, that's spoilers. All right, let's talk about the last story. This was my favorite story, so I want to talk about it before we get insane.
Okay, right. Just so everyone, if everyone was dying to know, the protagonist of the King of Chess, the chess fool, he wins. He plays Taoist chess and wins against 9 opponents simultaneously in, what is it, memory chess? Like,
yeah, the way chess is described here actually was kind of weird to me. Some of the pieces
have different pieces.
Yeah. Okay.
It kind of reminded me of the chess they play in Star Trek: The Next Generation, where there's like 5 different boards.
Romulan chess?
No, it's
yeah, it's 4D chess. It's the thing they talk about when they describe Trump's political strategy. It's Romulan, though. It is Romulan, I believe. Yeah.
Is it actually Romulan? I should know that. I'm a Trekkie.
Yeah. Well, are you?
I've been to the Star Trek Museum in Ticonderoga, New York. So yeah.
That's sick. Is it good?
Yeah, it's a replica of the original Star Trek set. So it's like all the hallways, all the rooms, and the.
Is that where Gene Roddenberry is from, or like why is it there?
Elvis impersonator from Las Vegas loved Star Trek and just made it in Ticonderoga. That's the true story.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I met him and shook his hand, and he was like, "I love Star Trek. I made the whole set. It's perfect, and it's fucking awesome, man. We should go. It's actually awesome."
You know what? Fucking, I would love nothing more than to do that.
Yeah, you guys should go, but it's too bad it's so far away from where you actually live, which is Utah.
Yeah. Well, Paul lives in Utah, and I live in fucking Tombstone.
Actually, just moved. I moved to North Dakota. I
live in Brisbane, Arizona.
I can't keep up. You guys just live in so many different places. So, okay, last story, King of Children.
About education, which is why Gabe loves it.
Well, okay. I do love it because it's about education and it's about a teacher. Basically, this is a pre-telling because the movie ripped it off of the Robin Williams movie. Come on, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
I can't remember the name right now.
We'll wait for you.
Hold on 1 second.
We wait for you.
Dead Poet Society. My wife who's like asleep in the bed just grumbles out Dead Poet Society. She knows instantly what I'm talking about, and I'm so stupid.
Epic Queen.
Yeah, Epic Queen.
Gotcha.
Go listen to our last episode featuring her. Lee by Evan Dara. Anyway, it's basically a like Dead Poet Society ripped off this story. The story is about a teacher or something. No, he initially starts off as not a teacher. He's a normal worker in one of these educated youth groups who goes out and is doing kind of like, you know, shit like tree clearing or digging ditches or whatever.
Once again, the point is very overtly, this is not an accredited person. This
exactly.
is not somebody who even has any really business doing the job.
And he's very aware of that. He's very self-conscious about like, I don't think I can do this. Like, why are you tapping me to become a teacher? And he has some level of education and whatever. And I thought that was interesting too, because again, like there's this like caricature of these sorts of very rigid authoritarian regimes where everyone has their perfect role that they're slotted into and blah 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 blah. This person's very insecure in their role. They're very like, what the fuck am I doing? And they have to improvise and they have to sort of make it their own in a way that I think, again, runs counter to the way that these sorts of situations are generally presented.
Right. I think, and again, I think that's all by design. And I think like the three stories all have characters like that. I think, you know, for instance, in the first story, King of Trees, like Lily is supposed to be the paragon of the revolutionary, like avant-garde or whatever, but Nadi is kind of more the person you end up respecting or whatever. And I you know what I mean? Like it's just the people who would ever garner official approval are always inferior in some way. And I think that's true of all three stories. And in this one, there's the difference is that it just does focus on kind of the narrator as also the protagonist.
Yeah, I mean, just to talk about, not to go back to the first story again, but Nadi, the dichotomy between Nadi and Lily is interesting to me because I respect them in their own right, equal, like in their own way, but I also disrespect them in their own way too. And I think that kind of flip floppy notion can relate to all three stories, like you just said.
Yeah, it's just the idea is like something is hypertrophied suddenly, and another thing is atrophied and weak, and what you don't get is the kind of balance that Taoism requires, right? Like a recognition of the full reality of the creative forces of the fucking universe.
But
sounds exhausting.
This story is also the most kind of like, maybe not the most, but it's very low to the ground. It's about a guy who becomes a teacher and he's like, these methods are not working for these kids, right? Like he's teaching a bunch of like kind of rural students, very poor, very kind of like whatever. And he kind of, it's like a Dead Poet Society or like fucking Freedom Writers, you know, journal or whatever. The what's the Hillary, is that Hillary Swank or whatever in that movie?
Yes, yeah.
Well, you know
Freedom
what
Writers Diary.
Stand and deliver.
Stand and deliver. This story is very like resonant with so many of these Western tropes where you have someone who is trying to teach a group of students who have been poorly served by the educational system up until this teacher gets involved, and the teacher sort of throws tradition and, you know, best practices out the window and finds something that works better for the students, and are ultimately punished for it. And ultimately this teacher is fired and sent back to sort of like, he needs more education, and he's sent back down to do more kind of manual labor before he's allowed to teach again.
Right.
But he's also kind of at the very last sentence, right? Isn't he like kind of relieved that happens?
It's ambiguous. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But Matt, would you say that this relates to, or this is congruent with the third season of The Wire?
Yes.
Or no, the fourth season.
Yeah, with, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
You know, yeah, it's the whatever, everything Gabe said is exactly what happens in that season.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a moral tale. Like
yeah.
You know, it's funny because like in that show, you know, it's like you get out to that season level, it's like you start to see how macro systemic they're trying to go with their mapping of the reality of, you know, that time period and everything, which is exactly what Ah Cheng is kind of trying to do as well. And I think why the like inclusion of all three stories works so well personally, like, because yeah, Gabe's right. It's a person who's like, you know, I've been given my directives, which I want to fulfill. So it's not a matter of somebody who's an overt political dissident, you know, who's like, no, like fuck Mao, fuck this. It's like, it's a person who still kind of wants to serve the greater purpose, and yet by, you know, again, hyper prescriptive systematic kind of directives from above, is incapable of doing so and doesn't, and then gets fired because they're not meeting a quota and or you know, a syllabus as as created from people who have never even been close to the situation that the main character is in.
Yeah, I mean, I read this as like kind of a is microcosm the right word, of just like microcosm of how the educational system still works in very specific aspects of even our society now.
Absolutely, dude.
Totally. Like it hasn't changed since the fucking 80s. Like it makes me so sad because like it just seems to not work and be such a horrible system that hasn't changed, and there seems to be no progress, and only people are only getting harmed by it, and there seems to be no answer for it. It just sucks. Yeah, but like Gabe, what do you
I think you're totally right. I mean, just in the even in the context of contemporary American schools, it's just depressing how relevant so many of these considerations are. So many of these insights, like he just there's a line that really just sat with me.
You're like, there's no way Mao's China pertains to my student currently.
It was depressing. It was depressing how much it did. It was really depressing how relevant. It was just so sad. And there was a line where he says, the narrator is talking about himself, and it's in a weird context. He's talking about animals. And I think this is a great example, Matt, of what you are talking about, where there's these like sneakily disruptive or politically dissonant like ideas snuck in here. So he's talking about animals. He says, this is on 176 if anyone wants to look. The sun peaked, the empty playground radiated light. Feeling cheerful, I stood outside the door, gazing outside. Some distance away, I saw Chen across the playground in the company of a stranger. They stopped and Chen pointed in my direction. This is the guy who ultimately fires him. The stranger stared at me and followed Chen into the office. I thought it was probably a friend of Chen's who was visiting and that he was giving him a tour of the school grounds. Pigs and hens roamed around outside, releasing occasional dirty traces behind them, searching in each other's droppings for something edible. I couldn't help silently congratulating myself on being a human. And I think that that's like more than just about the human-animal relationship. That's about the dehumanizing nature of the sort of like Maoist system and the educational system specifically, where you're reduced to these sort of like trick performing animal robots. And he's sort of acknowledging I'm about to get punished for what I'm doing, right? This is he's noticing this guy who's come in, who's about to fire him, and he's saying like, you know what, fuck it, like I did the right thing. I was a human. I made human relationships with my students and tried to make their lives better in a concrete, meaningful way. And that's still fucking relevant, damn it.
And it's so much more powerful by the fact that like, you know, Ah Cheng takes his time. Like he you know, there's this Wang Fu, the student, right? Like the kind of like the promising whatever student, almost a stereotype or whatever in his own, for the like upcoming teacher. And you've got this description of animals rooting through each other's shit for nutrients. And immediately following the passage Gabe just read is the like kind of culminating essay that you know, that Wang Fu writes, which I thought was moving.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, me too.
And and you know, that being justification enough for the actions that the main character took, and he accepts his punishment, and it's not punishment because it didn't result in anything bad as far as he was concerned, except for I guess his removal from being able to like affect more people. But like,
oh, captain, my captain, dude.
Right, self-righteousness. Like
Robin Williams all the students standing up and reciting "Oh, Captain, my captain" to Robin Williams.
Right. So fuck that story and fuck.
And then
Cider House Rules too for some reason, because I just think it's the same thing.
And then that one kid kills himself, and then Robin Williams killed himself 40 years
Right.
later.
That guy that was in House, MD.
Oh yeah, dark humor.
Mm-hmm. But again,
sorry.
It's the best episode. This is the best episode we've done ever.
This is the best episode. It's just falling apart. I haven't slept in almost 24 hours. So listeners, just that's my warning to you right now.
I'm 33, so I have dementia, and and my body is.
Do we? Okay. Does anyone have any smart points to say left before we go into the end game of this episode?
No, I mean, fuck. I feel like we should just talk about our final thoughts.
I don't know. I think we maybe need to is this an episode where we have to skip the Harry Potter rankings? Are there too many characters, or the houses, or
Yeah, I don't really know what to do about that because it's like the protagonist is not the narrator.
Is it cultural appropriation to put these people in Harry Potter houses?
No.
Yeah, I just don't feel like doing it. Also, for whatever reason, I feel like it'd be too hard, and I don't know where to place anybody. Let's skip it. It's a unique episode.
What Harry Potter house would Mao be in?
Slytherin.
Bad Gryffindor.
Maybe bad Gryffindor. That's what I was gonna say. Maybe bad Gryffindor is clarity of purpose and bravery.
Bad Gryffindor is Slytherin. Bad Gryffindor is Slytherin.
No, dude, Paul. This is entirely what we've been trying to discuss as not the same.
Don't raise your voice. Don't raise your voice at me.
I just did. What are you gonna do about it? Turn up your microphone that you bought? Yeah.
I live in Utah, but you live in North Dakota. But I'll be there in 14 hours.
I live in Brisbane, Arizona right now because I just said.
How many times do we have to do this, dude? Bad Gryffindor is a thing, and it's not Slytherin.
Yeah.
Well, Harry Potter is kind of a bad Gryffindor. It's not the wine. I haven't slept in almost 24 hours.
So here's my proposal. I say we each pick our favorite story, and then we rank the book, or we rate the book with numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who
as
picked
we've
this
been
book?
doing.
Was it
Me.
Gabe?
No.
It was Marl.
Okay.
Homie?
I'll go first.
Okay. Which one was your favorite of the three novellas, and what's your overall rating?
My favorite was the Queen's Gambit, the best queen. Definitely. I love that story.
Same.
I give that particular story a 4.1 out of 5. I loved it. And overall, I give the book a 3.8.
That is way higher than I expected, given what you were talking about.
What you were saying.
My favorite.
Well, I just think that, I mean, there was I did regard the political aspects of it, even though I had problems with the writing style. I did like I said, there was enough beautiful writing that I really like. It was really good, and I really liked it. And it was funny and odd and intriguing, and I was never bored. So regardless of my criticism, I still really enjoyed it. So
right on.
It's very adult of you. I think my favorite one was The King of Children, which is probably a reflection of my own kind of philosophical interests in education and pedagogy and all that. I thought there were a lot of human moments in that one too, where he has his friends come visit him from the work camp, and he like sort of pretends to be the teacher to them, and they act like students. I just thought there were so many like small human moments in the story, which again sort of speaks to my kind of feelings about this entire collection, which is it's just so human. It's so it has this political context, and it has these political implications, but it's so deeply about friendships and relationships and meaning making in these difficult contexts. Yeah, I think overall I'm going to say it's a 3.36 for me. And I think a lot, like there's definitely stuff that I whatever. Listen to the rest of the episode. Caveat my own ignorance.
All right, it's me now, eh? It was a neck and neck, but I think I will have to give it to the King of Chess as my favorite story. I don't know. There was something about the inclusion of tall balls.
Tall balls, fucking awesome.
Oh, okay. I need to say we didn't even talk about the other contender for best nickname, which is from the King of Children, which is a guy named Loose Shit.
Loose Shit is pretty profane, man, for something that was like, I don't know, dancing some delicate dance. It was just like, and then this
yeah. I mean, what I want to
butthole.
Do you think this book was rated like NC-17? So it just passed by so it could get to the public? Or do you think it was rated R in terms of like the review board for the government? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I
because
think
there's do you think that they had a problem with swear words and stuff like that and like weird silly names?
I think according to the afterword, it kind of got more of a circulation after there was a loosening of standards.
Okay.
In Deng Xiaoping's reign, where the backlash to how severe he was about certain themes and words and whatever being expressed sort of was enough to make him change his mind.
Okay.
I don't know. You know?
Matt, we need a number from you, dude.
Okay. So yeah. So the King of Chess was my favorite one. I think it just has the most overt examples of what Ah Cheng is about himself. And therefore, I don't know, it felt the most it felt the most like it was skirting the line between like biography and what he meant the most, if that makes sense. So I really like that story. I'm gonna have to give it a 3.68.
Wow, I have the highest score for this book.
Yeah, that's wild, dude.
That's totally crazy.
I love that. But you know what? That's why you have to listen to the end of these episodes, because you don't know where we're gonna fucking wind up.
Yeah, I was kind of faking you guys out because I did like this book a lot.
Alley-oop.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe.
Whoa, too soon.
Yeah, chill.
Yo, he's pre-COVID, so it's not too soon.
That's true.
But again, you know, like the context of it resonated with me, and I just like unfairly or outsizedly or not, the kind of afterword describing the fact that like it positively affected all of these, you know, we're joking, like it's a centrist thing, but
yes.
Like the fact that it garnered the approval of people who would hate each other were they to discuss their ideology or leanings in public, to me just is a mark of extreme approval.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is something that it deserves this kind of like mark of artistry when you're trying to like come across, especially what I regard as basically inarguably a criticism. Negative.
Well, I mean, to push back a little bit on that, I mean, atheists and Catholics alike love Harry Potter. It's all inclusive.
I do find it interesting that, you know, the other thing that they described in the end is there were the four olds, And state atheism is a thing in China right now. And there are 5 recognized religions in China.
What are they?
And it's Taoism, Buddhism. Fuck, hold on. I'm going to fuck up. Christianity, Islam. Fuck.
Shinto?
It's my only point is it's not Confucianism.
Icelandic.
It's something else. It's not Confucianism, which I really thought was like the other, in the kind of yin yang thing of this. Like I thought that was the other opposing force that was really powerfully present in its absence here, or in its instantiation in Mao's republic,
right?
But yeah, still not a recognized official religion in China now, I believe.
When do you guys think Mao will have like a Chinese food named after him?
That's it.
Well, it's been wonderful, guys.
That's the GG. That's the pin we're gonna have to leave it in.
Yeah. If Paul thought he was gonna say General Mao's chicken, he's wrong.
No, I'm not gonna let him say it. I'm not gonna let him say it.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah,
but we haven't done Harry Potter yet. I mean,
we said we weren't gonna do it.
We weren't gonna do it, man.
Oh yeah, you're right. Fuck, I haven't slept in a long time.
I think this is going to be our longest episode talking about something that we don't understand at all. So that's amazing.
We're just drunk and floundering.
It does make sense.
It does make sense. And I
listen. If you've made it this far in the episode, there is a decent chance that you will want to go potentially support the show. We have a Patreon. God damn it! I swear to God. It is patreon.com/spinecrackers. There's fun shit up there. There's cool bonus content. And if you give more money, you get better cool shit. Like you can talk to us and listen to us do this dumb shit in front of you. And you can even say things and communicate with us.
That. If someone came on and talked to us, that'd be fucking awesome.
That would be fucking awesome.
Listen, we're allowing these levels of unpolishedness to give you this. It's genuine.
We're real, dude. This is real shit.
We're each having our own moment right now.
We're grappling. we're grappling with these things in real time for your benefit.
Yeah,
hopefully.
So if you've made it this far, you might like it. So go check it out. We also have a YouTube channel. Paul and I are uploading shit on there recently, and Matt, we'll be uploading shit on there in the future. And it's cool. Like, subscribe, YouTube, give us money, Patreon,
Twitter.
No one's listening to this because it's 3 hours into a discussion about something we don't understand. So, but if you're still here, we love you.
I actually think it's only 2 hours. I think it's only 2 hours.
Yeah, I think it's closer to 3.
Well,
we started at 9 o'clock, I think, and it's 11 right now. So it's been 2. I think we're fine.
All right.
Either way, let's pull the cord on this.
Let's kill ourselves right now.
Fuck it, cut the cord. With the radio. All right, bye.
Bye.
Bye. I'm gonna go sleep.